Hey Waffle Gang, I do hope you're well. My name is Mark and today we're checking out some more Reddit stories, and if you do love a Reddit story, why not consider hitting that like, subscribe, maybe that notification bell too, and let's crack on with today's first story. Much love guys. Now, today's first story is one that we did read a year ago, but we only had one part of the story. 11 days ago, a new part came out, an update to this story. It's from Dragon Red X, who says my aunt stole my inheritance. Then karma struck and her life fell apart. My aunt was one of two kids my grandparents had. My mother was the polar opposite to my aunt. She worked from the age of 12 in my grandfather's shop, never asked for anything, and eventually managed to start her own business. My aunt never held down a job until the age of 26, was constantly stealing from her parents, and was constantly in trouble. Despite this, my aunt was spoiled by my grandmother, and so were her kids. She had 3 kids from 3 different men, and her first husband was not one of them, if you know what I mean. It didn't matter what my aunt or her kids did. My grandmother would always jump to their defense. She never had time for my mum and her kids, unless it was to get something from us. The only reason my mum would visit her was because she loved my grandfather. My grandfather passed away in 2004. And a few months after, my nan decided to write up a new will. My mother and my aunt were both present for it when she signed it, so they knew what was in it. It made it so that when she passed away, her home would be sold and the money split 25% each to my mum and aunt, and the remaining 50% would go evenly to the grandkids. At the time, the home was worth more than £500,000, so it would be a nice little inheritance, but nothing life-changing. In 2010, my mum died after an accident and did not have a current will in place, as she no longer had her business and was renting a house. In 2010, my mum died after an accident and did not have a current will in place, as she no longer had her business and was renting a house. She didn't have anything much of monetary value. The only thing she was concerned about was what would be done at her funeral should she have passed away. But it told me everything she wanted. The music, the flowers, the coffin colour, and even what people were to wear at the funeral. She wanted people to wear bright, warm colours. So when she passed, my aunt and nan took over all the arrangements and tried to undo all the things I'd told them. The songs were going to be songs I knew my mum didn't like. The flowers were all the wrong colours and they picked a hideous coffin. With the help of my siblings, we were able to change a few things back to what they were supposed to be. But the coffin couldn't be changed for some reason. My nan refused to let people come dressed as clowns, so it was all black. It was frustrating. After the funeral, my nan had her will changed. My siblings and I were told by our aunt that she didn't have any involvement with the writing of the will, and our nan told us she changed it that mum's share would go to her kids instead. All good, we thought. After mum passed away, my nan just stopped talking about my mum. At first, we thought it was because she was still recovering from losing her daughter. Even after 5 years after mum passed, she still wouldn't talk about her. Even if you brought up a story about mum, Nan would very obviously try and change the subject, usually about how hard my aunt and her shitty kids had it. And if you went to talk to her about your own problems, she would somehow bring it back to my aunt. I'd suffered a mental breakdown after my mum's death, so you can imagine how much it hurt to hear. Well, X had it so much worse. In 2016, my nan passed away. She had written down what she wanted to be done for her funeral, and it was basically all the same things she had picked out for my mum's funeral, even the music to be played. I don't know why she tried to have a dress rehearsal funeral using my mum as a stand-in, but it was obvious that's what she was trying to do. So, after a couple of months, our siblings and I were waiting to hear about the will reading, and my aunt kept telling me, "Oh, it'll be another month before we can do the reading." I didn't mind. I wasn't fussed about the money, to be honest. But my oldest brother was hoping to use the money to pay for a honeymoon for him and his then fiancée, and my younger brother was about to start uni, so it would be a hell of a help. Eventually, my dad bumped into the solicitor my grandmother had used to deal with her will, and asked what was happening. The solicitor let slip that the will had already been read, and that it left everything to my aunt. When my dad questioned this, the solicitor told him that my aunt had been present when the will was written, despite promising that she had nothing to do with it. When confronted, my aunt initially tried to deny, but eventually admitted to lying to all of us. She showed us the will and it confirmed what we already knew. The house and all its contents were now my aunt's. This includes my granddad's war medals. He fought in the Second World War. When I told her that he had promised them to me before he died, she said, "Well, unless you have it in writing, you will have nothing in this house." Anyway, I already gave them to Clive. My heart sank. Clive, not his real name obviously, was her eldest son, and the dictionary definition of a fuck-up. He'd been in and out of prison for stealing and dealing drugs. I knew the moment that prick had got his hands on my granddad's medals, they would have been sold off. We looked into taking her to court over the will, but everyone we spoke to said that we probably wouldn't get anything out of it. She immediately put the house up for sale at close to £750,000. She had pissed off too many people in our town, so she was going to sell the house and move closer to her daughter, who lives in a big city. An offer was made on the house, and she put down a deposit on a house near the big city, and I thought that was that. Here's where karma comes into play. The people who wanted my nan's house had a survey done on the house to see if there were issues, and boy oh boy were there. Turns out that the land the house was built on was way too soft for the type of house it was, and it was sinking. It had sunk 2 centimeters in the 40 plus years my nan and granddad had lived there. The sinking was accelerating to 1 centimeter per year. This meant within the next 3 years the house would need some serious work or be knocked down. The new value of the house? £60,000. The buyers immediately pulled out, having not even put down a deposit. She couldn't buy a new house but still had to pay the deposit on it. And while this was happening, she let Clive move in with her into her house that she rented from the council. He wasn't allowed to live in any of the council houses because he had trashed every single one he'd been given. Someone reported this and she was kicked out of her home. She was forced to move into my nan's old home as she couldn't live anywhere else. So there she is, living in a crumbling house with a shithead son and a partner. She was stuck there for 2 years. Every time I saw her, she would try and start talking to me, and I would just ignore her and walk off. One time as I was walking away, she screamed, "Your mother deserved to die for having a arslur word like you," in the middle of a busy street. Someone reported her to the police and she had an official warning from them and was ridiculed on Facebook. Every time I saw her after that, she looked more and more miserable. Eventually, she sold the house for something like £85,000 and moved in with her daughter in the big city. I lost contact with her and her kids after this. I thought karma had been issued. Oh, but karma still wasn't done with her. I bumped into one of her former friends and she told me what happened after she left our town. She moved into her daughter's home. Let's call her Sue. But they only had a 3-bedroom house and 3 kids. My aunt and her partner had to live in the smallest room in the house while my aunt looked for a job and a home to rent. Even with £85,000, she couldn't afford a home anywhere. After about a month, my aunt's partner ran off after emptying her account. She was left stranded in Sue's house, not contributing anything because all the money she makes goes into bingo. Eventually, she and my aunt get into a screaming match and my aunt said something along the lines of, "I should have aborted you." Sue immediately kicked her out of her house. So again, there's my aunt in a city where she knows nobody, no money, no home, and the last bridge she had, a smouldering wreck. Last anyone has heard, she was living in a caravan in the roughest part of the city, and she can no longer work because she's suffering early onset arthritis and can no longer move her hands. I know I shouldn't get out of joy of something like this happening to another person, but it does bring me some peace as to what happened. And the general gist of the comments on this one was, and I'll read one of the top comments was, "The dildo of consequences rarely arrives lubed." So around a year later, OP comes in with an update and says, "Hello all, around a year ago I told you about my aunt stealing my and my siblings' inheritance. I thought I'd make a quick update, but I wanted to answer and correct a few things. 1. I've tried to find my grandfather's war medals, but I do not have his service number or his death certificate. I can't even get access to his records. After I found out my cousin had taken and sold the medals, I did search local stores and Facebook groups looking for info, but no luck. I know he hadn't won any major medals. He was a mechanic and a driver in the Royal Army, so thankfully had a rather uneventful war. So it would have been just campaign and service medals. 2. Someone did ask for specifics about the signing of the will, pointing out that my aunt couldn't have been a witness to the signing of the will due to laws preventing it. I don't know the full specifics of what her and my nan had done, but her solicitor let slip that my aunt had known what was in the will before it was written. I just don't know the full details. I'm ignorant when it comes to solicitors and such, and it was my eldest sister who read the will in full and relayed it to the rest of us, We did ask if there was anything we could fight it, but everyone we talked to said there wasn't any case. Sorry if it was confusing. 3. I've seen a few comments on Reddit and on YouTube videos. Super weird seeing this in the wild, by the way. Using she/her to describe me. Well, I guess that's why people here give their age and gender at the start of these stories, but I'm a man, 32 male, in case you were wondering. I wasn't annoyed or upset about it, I just thought it was funny. Lol. 4. Someone asked what a caravan is. They're what we call travel trailers in the UK. Think of it as a fiberglass or aluminium box on wheels. People in the UK use them for short holidays, and they're not fun to live in for an extended period of time. I've experienced this, and it sucked. Anyway, on to the update. When I last left off, my aunt had been left abandoned in a big city and stuck with a caravan with crippling arthritis. Well, a few weeks after my first post, I got a news that she has somehow found a new boyfriend. How? I don't know, because my aunt had the look and build of an obese pug, and that was when she was in her 30s. So what she looks like now in her mid-60s doesn't bear thinking about. Well, her and a new boy toy, I think I just threw up a little, decided to move to a seaside town and start a new life. Well, you can guess what happened. Boy toy must have gotten sick of her, or found out that she had no money, so abandoned her. During an argument with her landlord, she suffered a heart attack, and while in hospital, she suffered another. She has recovered, but she was even more disabled than she was before. She's been given a home by our local council, but it's okay guys, because Clive has come to live with her. Oh my god, Clive. The fuck up who sold my grandfather's medals and lost my aunt her home. The man is a walking episode of Jeremy Kyle. For anyone outside of the UK, think of the program Jeremy Springer on steroids. And then Opie continues and says, after my aunt left my hometown, things started to look up for Clive. Someone took pity on him and gave him a job as a labourer. And for a few months, he was doing well, looking clean and well, despite everything that had happened. I was glad he was getting his life back on track. Well, it turns out not. He was given a work van to go from job to job, and one day came to work with a black eye and no van. He told everyone he'd been carjacked and the van stolen. Sadly for Clive, they found the van, and a very confused man wondering why the police were arresting him. After questioning and a text exchange, they found out that Clive had sold the van to a man and gave himself a black eye to make it look like theft. Clive was arrested. He was massively lucky because his boss didn't press charges. The boss told me later that he only did it out of respect of my grandfather, and all the police did was fine for wasting police time. After burning through all the money he had, he was again homeless. His only life was his younger brother. Let's call him Colin. Colin was in the armed forces and a pretty high rank from what I've heard. Colin was away from home most of the time on deployment, but had managed to buy a nice home in our town. He let Clive in his house on the agreement that he pay for part of the mortgage. You know where this is going. He stopped paying, stopped maintaining the house, and treated it like a drugs den. Colin asked him to leave, but Clive used squatters' rights to prevent removal. Because Colin was overseas, he couldn't come back to sort it out and kick him out in person, and had no one in the area to wait for Clive to leave and change the locks behind him. So Clive lived in the house for 6 months. That was until a pissed off father broke in and beat the shit out of Clive. You see, the father had found out that Clive, who was 41 by the way, had been sexting and selling weed to a 13-year-old girl. After that, Clive abandoned the house and ran off to mummy. From what I've heard, Colin had stripped the house and is selling it to move closer to his base. We found out most of this from my aunt's daughter Sue, the one who kicked my aunt out. You see, my brother was on holiday in Turkey, and just so happened to be in the hotel room next to Sue. She was very apologetic to my brother, and thought we might like to know what had happened. Seems to have a nice life and family, and no longer lives in the house she shared with her mum. I am generally happy for her, although I don't think I will try to mend our relationship. Sue had said some spiteful things to me in particular, and had never reached out to apologize. I might still feel a bit bitter for that. As for my aunt, I don't know how to feel. I do hope she gets better and grows enough of a spine to kick Clive out, as it will only lead her to more trouble. In some ways I do wish I could rebuild a relationship with her. She is the last living link to my grandfather and grandmother, as well as my mother's only living sibling. But I know I could never trust her. Never not see that face and the spitefulness that she had for me and my family. That she chose money, or what she thought was money, over us. And I don't think I can forgive that. I'm not going to go out of my way to do her more harm. I'm just happy that I'm in a better place now. And just in case OP ever does get to hear this again, they said they've heard it in the wild once, but you can actually access death certificates in the UK. You can apply for them. I believe there's a cost involved, but you can actually get hold of them, so that might help you in your quest to potentially get those medals. And I wish you all the luck in doing so, but holy moly, karma does strike every once in a while, doesn't it? Gee whiz. Let us know your thoughts down in the comments below. And let's move on to another story. And seeing as we're on the Entitled People subreddit, let's stick here for a bit, shall we? This is from Fire a New Princess, who says, "How I ruined a marriage." I know the title sounds weird, but hear me out. Okay, this event took place before the pandemic. I had worked at this job at least 6 years before I finally left its toxic environment. Yet, I got along with just about all of my co-workers. I also, won't lie, live with my mum. Which I will only say this because of a couple of things. My stepdad passed away from lung cancer in 2018, having passed 7 months after he was diagnosed. In 2019, she and I got the house we currently live in. Now, when this event took place, I worked nights at my job at the time. I would normally be home around 6 AM due to not driving at the time, and it was too cold for me to use my e-bike, so I would get rides from co-workers or bike depending on the weather. This is also Canada, so it can get cold. My asthma makes it hard to bike in cold weather. This was my day off, so I was hoping to just relax and just sleep. Though that wasn't meant to happen, it seemed, as I was woken up by some sound above me. I live in the basement at my house, as it's a finished basement and my bedroom is under the living room of the house. I just chalked it up to mum watching some TV. So I get out of bed and go grab my mum's bedding that was in the dryer. As I was getting up the stairs and open the door, that was when I see the dog. Another thing I should point out, the dog, Buddy, was my stepdad's dog, who he would call Buddy was his furry son. This dog kept my mum sane when my stepdad passed away and was comforted by this dog in everything that came into her life. I had Buddy 3 years after my stepdad passed, before he was diagnosed with lung cancer like my stepdad. We still miss this dog. Now, it was strange for me to see this dog in the kitchen. The basement door leads into the kitchen, instead of the living room or my mum's room. He was practically glued to my mum's side. So I asked, "What are you doing out here, Buddy?" He's just wagging his tail at me, so I go towards the living room door and saw the door was shut. Again, that confuses me, so I just mentally shrug and open the door. "Hey mum, I'm bringing up your..." And I stopped when I see a very familiar face on the couch with my mum. "Oh, OP, this is..." "I know who this is, mum," I said. It wasn't clicking in for me as to what was going on, because I again just woke up from doing a close, it says, and didn't really get a hell of a lot of sleep. "How do you know him?" she asked. The guy's eyes were wide since I walked into the living room. "I work with his wife." Mum is in confusion and kind of leans back a little looking at the man, asking, "Your ex-wife?" She seemed a little skeptical. Before he could even answer, I said no, his current wife. Insert co-worker's name. Mum, of course, is in shock, and again, I don't clue in as to what was going on. Just talking as I walk further into the living room with her bedding and set it on a chair. I pet Buddy and make sure he goes outside to do his thing, then I go back to my living room in the basement. The guy was kicked out a while later, though beforehand he had begged my mum to tell me not to tell his wife about this because she's possessive. So for months I kept my mouth shut, though that wasn't the only thing that she told me. She told me that the reason why Buddy was kept out of the living room was because the moment this guy, let's call him Jay, walked into the house, Buddy actually growled at him. The dog, who loves everyone he meets, growled at someone. That alone shocked me when my mum told me this. Well, that, and it turns out that Jay also knew my mum's cousin and her cousin's husband. They went to high school together. I only found out that when mum mentioned that was part of their conversation before I came up the stairs. When mum also told me that he was there because they met on Tinder, and that this was a date. Oh, how I wished I knew that sooner. I would have kicked his ass out the door myself, because if there was one thing I hated, it was cheaters. My mum had been cheated on before, and she hates them, so she was thankful that I came up what I did. There's still more to this story. As I said, I kept my mouth shut for months and not telling my co-worker. Let's call her Elle. Well, months after this date happened, I was working with her. As we worked, I heard her saying that she was being kicked out of her townhouse. I was confused and asked what happened. Elle told some of this, that Jay tried to overdose, and she had managed to get help in time to save him. So she pretty much saved his life. Yet, how does he repay her? By trying to get her kicked out of the house. So when I heard that, I'm just like, screw this, no repercussions. Then I told her everything that happened. How we met my mum, to him being at my house, to when I came up, everything. When I was done, she just stared at me. A mix of shock as well as, well, I'm not really sure what this other look was, but she looked like this had happened before, which she confirmed. Turns out Jay cheated on her throughout their entire marriage. They have 5 kids. Her oldest is at least 20s or 30s, I don't remember. Also, he was the possessive one, not Elle. Whenever they separated, he was always allowed to see other people, but not her, and made damn sure of that. Once she had everything I told her, she had finally been pushed because, with what I told her, it seemed that it was far worse than what he's done in the past. Their marriage was just toxic from what I learned later on. Not just with destroying her property, such as her phone, but he hacked into her Facebook to make posts. I don't know all the details, but what I do know is that there is now a restraining order against him. He even tried to tear her down by saying that no man would want her because she was used and old. Mind you, she isn't old, she's still young and has a lot of life in her. Then told her that she's too old to get into a union job. But she proved him wrong on all accounts. Got herself a good man, got a good paying job, and now she even lost weight. Hell, she's doing a damn good job living her life right now. But there was one thing that I had asked her, after I told her everything. Elle, you said I look just like my mum, right? I'd asked. She said, yes you do. I posted pictures of me with my mum's Facebook from my mum's 50th birthday, and Elle had commented just how much my mum and I look alike. I'm a clone to say the least. Her husband had met me many times in the past, and he would sometimes bring Elle coffee or bring her the debit card that she forgot. So, how is it that your husband didn't even notice how much I looked like my mum when he met her? I asked. Her words, I can't help but smile at the thought of such a thing. Because he's a fucking idiot. I laughed a little at that. Even their son, who worked with us, told me that his dad isn't that smart or bright. So you can tell it had to be true if his own wife, now ex-wife, and son tell me the same thing. When I'd even told Elle how he knew my mum's cousin and her husband, Elle had told me that it was most likely that he would have tried to get lucky with her as well. Though that wasn't going to happen anyway, because my mum's cousin is still very much in love with her husband, high school sweethearts. So this guy tried to get lucky, only for it to ruin his marriage. Karma in its finest. I still wish I had said something sooner, I won't lie. This is my only regret with this. But at least I'm happy that she got out of that toxic marriage, now living her best life without that jackass. And just casting my mind back to the title on this one, it was titled, How I Ruined a Marriage. You didn't ruin that marriage. He ruined his own marriage. That's totally down to him. But now, I'm going to turn this one to you guys. What do you guys make of this situation? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Now, just a huge thank you from the bottom of my heart for getting involved in today's stories. Your love, your support, your time always means the absolute world to me. So thank you so much. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Take care and much love.